we're coming up on nearly 2 years since the 300D was first announced, and we still haven't seen many offers from other manufacturers that can compete with this light. I think that really goes to show how innovative and ahead of its time this light really was, especially at this price point. However, since the start, this light was not perfect, and one of the major complaints about it has been the very noisy power supply. With NAB 2019 around the corner, we might see Aputure release a Mark II, giving people that silent, integrated power supply that they've been asking for. Well, several months down the line, once it actually goes on sale, that is. But if you're too eager to wait, well, do I have the solution? And no, my solution is not just use batteries instead. Although if you want to learn more about that, I do have a video about batteries, and I'll be making an update video soon. For example, this, the DNO, I didn't mention in my last video, but they're pretty cheap and pretty great. Anyways, our goal is to be able to use the light with the normal AC power outlet. So our journey begins by opening up the OEM power supply. My first idea included changing the fan inside the power supply, but don't worry, we're not doing that either. Although that would be a pretty cheap method to do it. Let me know if you want me to try that as well. What I'm looking for here is some specifications. You see, the original power supply included with the 120T and original D, very clearly labeled and manufactured by Meanwell, a power supply manufacturer.
This power supply, however, doesn't even have a visible label. You might even be fooled to think that Aputure manufactured it themselves. That is, until you look inside.
And what do you know? This one is too. It's just a casing that's been manufactured by Aputure. Okay, so let me see here. Looks like you can buy this unit for around $60. That's nice to know if you ever break yours. It has a 26 to 31 volt adjustable range, and it can output 321 watts with an efficiency of 89%. So that might seem really good, 89%, but in power supply terms, it's actually not that great. And that's the reason this unit needs a fan. 11% of the energy used to make those 320 watts of usable energy are actually being wasted in heat. That's just one of the many reasons I don't advocate using a AC inverter battery power bank thing. Not only are you losing in efficiency when converting from battery power to AC, but then you're also losing about 11% apparently when converting it back to DC for the control unit. So let's look for alternative power supplies, some that are within these power ratings. And why not stay in-house and look at Meanwell? Here we go. This is the HLG 320H30A. Now all those numbers are important for different reasons. HLG just refers to the model number, 320H refers to the rated power output, and 30A refers to the output voltage, with the A meaning adjustable. It being adjustable is actually important to us, because as you'll see later, the original Aputure power supply is outputting 30 volts exactly. It just happens to be a more common power supply, at least in my area, therefore cheaper. Let's look down. So the rated output power of this is 321 watts. It can output 30 volts and 10.7 amps continuously at 94% efficiency. And if you look closer, you'll notice this unit doesn't have a fan, which is exactly what we need.
So let's get one. A week later or so, here it is.
So now we just have to make this power supply with a control unit. And the process is actually a lot simpler than you might think. On one side of the power supply, you have 3 input cables, and on the other side, 2 output cables. Now these are clearly labeled, but in case you're wondering, the 3 wires correspond to the 3 prongs in your normal AC adapter, while the other 2 cables are just your DC outputs. Wait, hold on a minute. Doesn't the Aputure power supply have 4 output pins? Yes, it does. But they're actually just redundant connections. So pins 1 and 2 are connected to the negative output, and pins 3 and 4 are the positive output. We can actually see this by opening the original power supply. Something that, by the way, if you're attempting this at home, you don't even have to do anymore. I just wanted to show you how I got to this unit and how the outputs are connected like that.
If you still doubt me, here's the continuity test. Damn, hands in the way. The next step is getting our input power to these cables here. You remember.
From here, you could connect this to a similar female input, like the one in the original power supply, but instead, I'm gonna wire it straight to an extension cord.
The extra length is welcomed. No need to be fuddling around with extensions anymore. And that's just one less loose cable to worry about. Another helpful detail was the see-through head, to know exactly what cable was what. Then, all I had to do was match the cables and twist them together. Technically optional, I'd recommend soldering as well, to prevent these connections from coming loose. Just apply your flux of choice and generous amounts of solder, making sure you don't accidentally bridge the connections. Clean off the residue with some rubbing alcohol and finally add some isolation. Insulation? Heat shrink tubes would be best, but I only had electrical tape lying around. Either way, apply it carefully. A short here would be extremely dangerous.
Similarly, for the DC output, I'm going to connect it straight to a 4-pin XLR connector.
Like this one. It even comes apart for easy soldering.
These are not super easy to find, but I'll link to some down below. They're relatively cheap too.
Because of the insulation on the original power supply, it is not obvious what pins are positive and which are negative. So we set our multimeter to voltage reading and checked for ourselves. This was a really important step. Not only can you see the exact output of the original power supply, but getting the polarity right is essential. To the point that I actually decided to mark the polarity on the pin assembly part with a silver Sharpie, just to be absolutely sure. If you're attempting this for yourself, however, you only need to know that pins 3 and 4 are positive while 1 and 2 are negative. By the way, this is what the original cable looks like. I guess you could just reuse these heads, but I'd rather have the old power supply and cables as backup. The same goes for the female XLR on the case. You could use that, but backup. Moving on to our connector assembly, we start by sliding the back rubber part onto the output cable. You might have to jam it in there, but that's okay since it makes for a tight and secure fit. After doing a test fit, I realized that too much of the wire was exposed and needed some trimming. So that's what I did. This also proved convenient as I could now separate the pre-soldered tips into 2 strands per wire to accommodate for the redundant pins. Now it was time to put the rubber pieces back on. This other plastic piece you actually don't need to put on right now. Turns out one side is cut and can be slided on later. And then pre-apply some solder to the bare wires and the XLR pin holder. Then, paying attention to the silver Sharpie markings, we soldered the positive wire to pins 3 and 4 and the negative wire to 1 and 2. Until it looks something like this. Well, hopefully yours looks nicer. Using a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol, I cleaned off any residue from the flux and applied some hot glue for insulation and to keep the cables from touching and shorting out. Again, heat shrink wrap would be better here too. Especially since I had to trim some of the hot glue off with a box cutter for the back pieces to fit properly. A process that took a surprising amount of effort, mainly because of the hot glue fiasco. But eventually it went in, and now finally it's ready for a test.
Alternatively, you could wire it to a female connector,
Links to this down below as well.
making your configuration very similar to the OEM one. And while we're comparing, one last thing to point out is that we're not installing a power switch.
I'm foreign. Leave me alone.
Although you could attach one on the live wire on the input side.
Preferably before you do all of this.
However, at that point you'd probably also want to build some sort of casing for it. That's just one of the reasons I didn't want to do it that way.
Alright, but on with the test then.
And this is very nerve-wracking. Remember, if we accidentally got the polarity wrong, we could burn our $1,000 light.
And it works! Without the light being attached anyways. I didn't really want to risk it at first. We're off to a good start, but now, finally, the moment of truth. Hooray.
It worked! What do you know? And if for some reason you're worried that it might change some characteristics from the light, well, I've been using it this whole video. As you can see, there's still no flicker or anything like that. While I'm not using it 100% right now, I did leave it on at 100% for several minutes, and the power supply actually didn't even get hot. But with that said, I also haven't had the chance to test it for very long periods of time. Overall, I'm pretty pleased with the results. I must say my decision to just wire the 4-pin XLR directly to the output is more inconvenient than I thought, as I probably shouldn't just have the power supply just hanging off the controller box and the cable is no more than 12 inches long. With that said, ideally for me, I would like to find a way to mount this on the back of the controller to make it like a single unit. And I do have some idea as to how to accomplish that. So maybe we'll see a part 2. Let me know in the comments down below if you'd like to see that. But with that said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something. Let me know if you're going to attempt this on your own light. I'm really interested, especially since so many of you have complained about the noise from the power supply. And furthermore, actually, do you think Aputure should include this power supply from the start, even if it meant having a $60 to, let's say, $100 price increase on the light? Or do you think that the price saving was well worth it? Any other thoughts, leave it down in the comments down below. And while you're down there, check the description for links to all the products we feature in this video. Using those links actually gives me a little bit of a kickback and allows me to keep creating this content for you. Don't forget to subscribe so you can see part 2, maybe. Or actually, I have another video coming up on how to make a $70 B-mount battery. If it works, it's gonna be pretty awesome. Then again, it might not work at all.